Next morning, he emailed back. He said he would love to meet, and we met. He wrote the first check, and right after that, the
I
same
didn't
day,
know
I
that.
just emailed everyone that I know who might invest.
And you got your first check from Chamath, so everyone's in now.
And I couldn't raise a single dollar for 2 years, and Chamath wrote the first check, and in 2 weeks I was oversubscribed.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Today's guest is such a star, you guys. I'm so excited for y'all to hear his story, and what a great way to wrap up the year. Basar is from a small village in Turkey. He made his way to Silicon Valley, where he earned a Stanford MBA and went through Y Combinator with friends. Together, they built an education technology app with a mission that's really dear to Basar, to provide students with access to education via one-on-one tutoring that's both affordable and accessible, and they're just getting started. Learn about how Basar got top Silicon Valley investors to fund his company, what routines have been helpful for him as a founder, as well as my favorite, how he views failure and success. Enjoy.
Hi, Jen. How are you?
I'm great. I'm really happy to see you. Thanks for coming and making the time.
Of course. Always a pleasure.
And like Machin said, I love the California flag behind you.
Oh, yeah. I carry it everywhere. India, Istanbul, wherever I go.
I love it. I love it. When was the last time you visited the Bay Area?
Actually, it was 2 months ago. 45 days ago, but it was just for fun.
Because I feel like you're in the Bay Area in New York City quite a bit.
Yeah. Actually, for work, I spent almost half of the year last year in the United States, mostly New York, but I spent a few months in California too.
Awesome. Well, I am thrilled to have you on the podcast, Basar. I'm excited to learn about Kunduz, and I love that it means beaver. So busy beaver, curious beaver. And you guys are sharing high quality education to millions of kids. So I grew up in Sierra Leone and I love this mission. We didn't have equal access to education. And I love what you guys are doing. You're currently in India and Turkey and other countries. And what's really cool is you provide answers in 15 minutes, 24/7 access to tutors, and the fee is affordable. It's just $9 per month for unlimited access to these tutors. So I'm excited to dive into that. But if you'll let me, I'd love to start a little earlier in your journey and talk about where we met. So we met at Stanford Business School as international students, and maybe we can start with how you got into Stanford. What was key to your journey in getting in?
Yeah, there is a more... of course, a romantic story behind it, but whoever asked that question, most of the time they always look for more technicalities, what did you focused on, GMAT and the GPA stuff, and that part of the technicalities is pretty important. I think my case is pretty insightful for people who are thinking about it, because I wasn't coming from a typical background on papers. My GPA was pretty much bad. You remember in our first day, they were just giving us this orientation, and just a part of it was about getting to know your class, right? Who did what, etc. What is the GPA average, range, GMAT averages and ranges, etc. I realized at that point that my GPA was the lowest in that range. It was how low it was, and anywhere you see online, for that GPA, nobody just gives a good outlook about it, the potential about it. And basically, I applied to many schools, but what I knew at the time was that if my GPA was that bad, I should figure out GPA and GMAT part. And I pretty much spent a lot of time studying GMAT to be able to compensate of 4 years of mediocre study. And that part, I think one thing that gives hope to people that I talk most of the time is that if you do well in GMAT, there's always a chance, because most of the schools, if they like you as a person, your resume, your story, whatever, they want to be convinced that you can intellectually, analytically survive their curriculum. And even if your GPA doesn't prove that, GMAT can give you a lot of chance to show them that you can. So I think, one takeaway would be never lose hope just because you had a terrible GPA. GMAT can always give you an opportunity to show yourself, prove yourself that you're capable of going through the program. And this part was pretty much the technical part. that was different for me. And the other part, most of the time, the story part, resume part, essays, whatever you want to call it, I think GSP is taking that part quite seriously. And but I think I just like took it to a little bit like to an extreme, and I started like preparing essays, just like reading these questions, just like writing my own versions, etc. pretty early, and I was convinced about like how my story was on paper so much that like I decided to just act on it before MBA. I was like a pretty standard like MBA candidate, studied engineering, got into consulting, did 2 years of consulting, and at the time I was pretty much convinced that I was going to focus on education post MBA. But as I just researched more about things, like did more introspection, I realized that I want to act now and I want to just try things as much as possible before MBA too. And I postponed my MBA plans for another year to be able to give myself more room about like what I can do and what I can like learn before getting into MBA. And I did like 1.5 years of portfolio strategy for a conglomerate in Turkey who was thinking about investing in education. It was like pretty lucky because I haven't seen such position ever since in Turkey. Like at that point in time, there was a conglomerate who decided to invest in education, and at the same time, I was like exploring like different opportunities, and that was pretty lucky on my end. But I took that and like I postponed my MBA plans for another year. And once I got my like acceptance, I quit that and started working on an idea that ended up being Kunduz. And you may remember that like I already started Kunduz at a very like uh, like
Early.
novice level when I got into GSP. So, but I think one thing I love sharing with people, like especially international students, is that just I've seen a lot of like essays talking about like my country has gone through this economic recession in the past. It severely affected my family. That's why I want to get into MBA and like build a fintech startup. I know all of these are like real and nobody lies about them, but like you see them, all these like consulting background people are just like writing the same things over and over, just probably overnight. I think just like taking these questions seriously and just reflect on them, even act on them, regardless of MBA, it helps a lot. First, with your chances in these schools, and second, to be honest, like beyond GSP, I think I saved 3 years in my whole entrepreneurial experience by like exploring and discovering that. I think yeah, these questions are asked. I don't know for what reasons, but like definitely one of the reasons is that just like help you figure out what you want to do in life and just like start taking action. Maybe post MBA, maybe during MBA, but why not start doing them pre MBA?
Yeah. For me, one of the most important aspects of the whole experience, business school experience, were the people we met and getting to learn from each other's experiences. And so I'm so grateful that you are a classmate. And it's just a huge example of why just the GPA on its own isn't a good measure of a human being. And I think you've taught me a ton. We've talked about your company in the past and what fundraising is like, et cetera. And it's been look at the impact you're having. And so what a beautiful journey and experience and example. So I do remember actually in one of the halls, this was called Highland at the time, now it's called JMAC. We were sitting and you were telling me a little bit in the early days about Kunduz. So when did you have this aha moment of you want to build Kunduz? How did this all come about? What was that idea sparked from?
I took something a little too seriously at the time. Like I was in GSP, I was reading Lean Startup and the book, and I was like basically just applying like to the extreme to every part of it, and like I started talking to users and like the potential users, target audience, and from day one I knew that my focus was all about K-12 and like providing social mobility through the K-12 education. So I knew that through education technologies, it is more possible in like high school and middle school. And I was like constantly speaking to students at a point where like I was literally like checking out their phones about like how they use different apps for educational purposes. Like WhatsApp, I see like a lot of them use WhatsApp for having study groups in a way, just like asking each other the questions they get stuck with, and realizing that almost all students had these groups, but none of them were functional because everybody was like first focusing on their own studies or just like whatever they focus on. And second, none of them were experts, none of them were teachers. And I basically start with like offering them from now on, I'll be answering your questions. And by the time I realized that I was a little too old to be able to help them, I went to my own like undergrad, like my college, and just like starts like giving flyers to
Asking.
students in the freshman
Yeah.
dormitory, saying that if you still feel hard about just like practicing these like university entrance exam questions, you can get paid by just solving each of them now. And then I put together a WhatsApp system where like I was getting questions from random numbers, and I had like different WhatsApp groups that consist of like students, college students who are interested in solving questions in different courses. And I was basically the app. My WhatsApp account was the app, the first MVP. And I've solved more than like a few thousand questions in the first month. And then just my co-founders got excited about it too. They joined me, and like we built the first version. I think by the time we started GSP, there was the first version on the App Store, and like we were just basically an app. But I basically just took that like whole lean startup approach a little too seriously, and just end up finding a good opportunity at the first trial. A lot of times,
Yeah.
like I see a lot of entrepreneurs trying different things, not working out. Luckily, I think the part that I was the most lucky was like basically finding it in the first time. But at the same time, I was not risk averse at all because I tried it with no cost. It was basically my WhatsApp account, so that gave me a lot of liberty to just like, try things and just not be afraid of like how much it costs, etc., etc.
Yeah. The other thing I hear too loud and clear is you had a ton of demand for this version 1 of your product. You had, I think you said it was thousands of requests for help with homework from students, so much so that you alone couldn't even handle that and you needed to go ask others to get involved. And I think that's a really strong signal too from the market that, hey, you actually have something here. And then it sounds like you were able to get your co-founders involved to build a first MVP, load that on the App Store, and then come to business school and build. I know this is a huge opportunity to be able to build alongside business school. What was that like for you? Do you feel like you were able to take more from classes and building Kunduz in parallel?
I think that there is both. Like there were courses that I took most out of the experience because Kunduz was my lab or like my
Yeah.
playground. But there were like a lot of moments where I had to deal with things and like I was missing the readings and the homeworks. I wasn't the best teammate in the like group projects, etc. There were those times too. And yeah, I mean, I was also doing the joint degree with that school at the same time
Right.
too. So I was mostly compromising the sleep part of my life. But I would say it definitely helped, not only the courses and the school itself, but at the same time, just seeing all these people from the startup ecosystem and the Silicon Valley. And Stanford was like basically, and still is basically considered the heart of it. And being able to build and grow that at the epicenter of it as a Turkish entrepreneur was a huge chance. So I think it's both, like it goes both with the class itself and also like the whole experience, the people I get to know, I get to meet and get connected.
Totally. Did you do your first fundraise while at school or after
Oh,
you
yeah.
entered YC?
Yeah.
While at school, what was that like?
It was interesting because for the first 1 year and a half, in a very like stupid way, I was assuming that no one would be interested in like investing in a Turkish startup, EdTech startup in Silicon Valley. So I wasn't proactively going after investors, and I was also expecting to have this like meaningful growth and scale to have. But there was one moment I remember vividly. You'll also remember it because it was an interesting day at the JSP. You'll remember the view from the top of Shamat, right?
Yes.
It
Yes.
ended up being like a huge thing, not only at Stanford, but like in Silicon Valley, in the whole tech space. And a day before that, I was having a minor crisis by myself about like self-questioning what we are doing, whether this social entrepreneurship is like a little bit of wishful thinking, and whether I should just focus more on more commercial and only for profit path, or just like whether this is like the right way to approach edtech, etc., etc. Because at the time I was not able to find a fundraise like investor at all. I couldn't raise a single dollar at the time. And then I had this talk, like the view from the top. And Shamat was like basically, he mentioned a lot of things, but the part that I was looking for was like basically how he sees investing and what he expects out of investing these companies, and how entrepreneurship and tech space can change the world for better. And I was like, finally, I felt like I found someone who exactly felt like I do. And this person was on the other side of the table. And I was like, okay, at least there are investors who think like me in the
Right.
ecosystem, in the space, especially on the other side of the table. And it was like this part of the speech was exactly what I needed for my own perseverance at the time, because I started to really question it. And I it was a Friday afternoon, the talk, and I remember just being in my room like 10 or 11 p.m. Friday night, decided to email him, found his email somewhere, etc., and just basically thank you him for the inspiration. And next morning he emailed back. He said he would love to meet, and we met. He wrote the first check, and right after that, the
I
same
didn't
day,
know
I
that.
just like emailed everyone that I know who might invest. And
And you got your first check from Chamath, so
from
everyone's
Shamat,
in
and
now.
like I couldn't raise a single dollar like for 2 years, and like Shamat wrote the first check, and in 2 weeks I was oversubscribed already, and that was like a pretty like, typical Silicon
Right.
Valley Stanford story.
That is awesome. So cool. So many people can resonate to this, right? I feel like
Right.
every entrepreneur, you're not an entrepreneur if you haven't questioned whether or not your idea is worthless and have felt so unseen that you need to take a step back. So what a beautiful story. What was your meeting with Chamath like? Was he asking you questions about the product? Or was it more of you both felt seen in the way you think about the world and social business?
I mean, there are like three parts, and like it was the same, similar with most of the investors that joined us ever since. They were always looking, and that includes Shamat, three things. Like the growth tells something. They don't know anything about Turkey, of course, but the growth itself was telling the story. And they, of course, look at the founders and how excited they are about the space or passionate about the space, and like how relevant their background is. And the third one is, in our case, is like, is it really like a mission driven, and like how it can impact the future, or like the students, or like the education space itself. I think he was like checking each of these, like, but like delving into the details a little bit more, especially to be able to understand the space itself. So I think yeah, the in terms of like what he looks for, it was pretty similar to the other investors, but he was a little bit more curious about like the details of it and like what it looks like in Turkey.
And at this point, what was your team size, revenue, number of students on the platform?
I think we were having a $25,000 MRR. I
Okay.
remember that. It was like growing very quickly. A few months after that, we got into YC with that growth. And
Amazing.
what was the other question? The team.
I was just gonna, and then your team size, was it just the co-founders, the three of you at this point? Did you have
Three
more
of us
people?
all part time. I was the most full time person, as like
Yeah.
as someone who
And
was
you're
doing like
like
two
double
masters at once.
MBA,
Yeah.
MED.
And we have like 5 part-time college students who started as like
Helping.
a tutor in our platform, got a little bit more interested in like the entrepreneurial space and became part of the team, but they were all part-time.
So this was your jump start. And then it sounds like after this, you decided to apply to YC.
Yeah.
Why did you make that decision? What was that journey like?
I mean, when you try to be an entrepreneur outside Silicon Valley, I think you're missing a good mentor. And the worst is that there are a lot of people who are like acting like they're mentor, but you see that they guide you to the completely wrong directions. And I think YC was important for us because at a global level, we were guided by the best mentors that you could think of. And we needed that. We needed that heavily. And it was our first startup. And we like Stanford taught me things about entrepreneurship, but I think even at Stanford, you would see different entrepreneurship classes. They were teaching a different school of thoughts, right? And but YC has a very committed like way in on entrepreneurship, and I think just as three co-founders, just like going through that education, helped us speak the same language and not be misled by wrong information or like wrong guidance, whether in the ecosystem in Turkey or like whatever we read online. I think that was a pretty good school as founders to go through. And the second part is we always want to do something global, but we weren't sure at first. And seeing how dysfunctional the local ecosystem here is, I think we needed someone who can just like who can be a gateway for us. And YC was for us at the time was the best for that. And also like as a no-name entrepreneurs, yes, Stanford helped a lot with the name, but at the same time, putting the YC stamp on Kunduz helped us in so many ways, including like expanding to India, recruiting people there, etc. In every level, YC brand has helped us in the best way possible.
It sounds like with YC, you were able to expand to India. And maybe at the beginning, you started about 25,000 monthly recurring revenue.
Yeah.
And then what was it like at the end of YC? What was the growth that you were able to achieve? And I hear stories of founders being able to YC pushing them and challenging them more than they thought they could challenge themselves, is why I'm asking.
Yeah, that's a good question. For EdTech companies or education companies, especially if you're part of the summer cohort, there's no way you can show growth because it's an off-season.
Out of school.
Yeah. We knew how to prepare ourselves for the next school year, but it was impossible for us to be able to show growth month by month. But at the same time, our revenue at the time was already at a very good level. So we haven't felt a pressure in terms of like giving a good picture about Kunduz because it was in a good place already. So, but we were like mostly focusing on getting ourselves prepared to the new school year and also learning this like way of entrepreneurship, applying them every day. I think we were lucky just because we had a revenue traction that we could show from the past school year. But for a lot of new edtech startups, it is more difficult, especially if you join the summer cohort and if you are like focusing on K-12.
That makes sense. Before we continue with Kunduz's journey, I want to ask, do you think a master's in education, is that something you would recommend someone that's trying to build an edtech startup get?
I wouldn't.
Or what were the critical pieces that you got from your master's in education?
I don't think anyone needs any masters for building anything. Like it goes with like maybe like in healthcare, like there are certain parts that are crucial, but you can learn anything online or with your own research or by doing things now. And I wouldn't highly recommend it, but I loved it because it gave me the background of this whole theory and like gave me the confidence about what we do, gave us a context about what Kunduz envisions and what it represents, etc., etc. I think intellectually it was extremely satisfying, and at the same time, it like at every level it always helped me put things in context, and it gave me the confidence. But I would definitely not like advise someone to first do a master's education before starting an edtech startup.
That's useful. So where is Kunduz today? What's your team size now? What can you share about locations, product, revenue, operational metrics?
Sure, yeah. Right now, we are above 100 people, around 100 people at least. And we basically started with a product that is like helping students with the questions they get stuck with. And we became a leader in that space. We basically defined the category itself in Turkey. And now in Turkey, when you look at the whole space, you see that the top 5 percentile of students, majority of them use Kunduz. More than half of them use Kunduz.
Household name.
Yeah, I mean, in Q&A,
That's awesome.
I can confidently say that. But at the same time, as like an impact-driven person or people as founders, now we start to be obsessed about this, the remaining part of the bell curve, like the 95% part. Because to be honest, or just to give ourselves feedback, we've started from a point where we have built something where that resonated with our own education experience. We were like the nerds and just like very hardworking students at the time. And the things that we heard from students made a lot of sense for us. And we focused on making it perfect. And now seeing that the top 5 percentile uses it is just like making us proud, but at the same time, just like pushing us towards like, okay, what about like other students? What we can do about them and what they look for, what they're looking for. Because if you think about the typical studying journey, let's say, you start with the need of improving your grades, let's say, and then you just start watching some videos or just read the material stuff and to be able to have a better understanding about the subject matter. And then, especially in science, and you start practicing to just make that whole learning experience and your knowledge deeper to be able to a point where like you apply it to the real problems. And then as you practice, you realize that you get stuck at certain points and you care about them and you have this urge to just get a help about it. That last part is like getting to that level is the perseverance of the top 5%. And but there are a lot of students that are giving up in every part of these phases that I mentioned. And now we are just for the next school year, we are preparing and designing like products that could address the issues and problems the students have in the meat of the bell curve, let's call it, as in the classroom, and how we can help them. And a lot of times what we hear is students want to sit on their desk and study, but they don't know what to study or they don't have the high confidence in like where to start. And there are a lot of contents online, but giving that content with the right guidance, that is missing. And now we are expanding our product with that whole insight and hoping to be able to get to the level where we can talk about we are like used by the half of the all students in Turkey and hopefully in other countries too. So this is where we are in Turkey as a scale, as a mindset, where we are and where we want to be headed to. Globally, what we know is our Q&A product and operations and technology, it's all top tier compared to the similar services globally. And that gave us the confidence to found an office in India and expand to the United States too. And now we know that we give the best service with the best product because we are unlimited. We give it at the best price, and we made it an interactive experience where students and tutors can chat. And that's why we are differentiating from like a typical solutions manual where students just look at the answer. And we know that we can grow it, but we will be sticking to the core product that we have, the Q&A globally for a while. Once we feel like we get to the levels that we are in Turkey right now in global markets too, in English speaking markets too, then we can start thinking about what other products we can add globally too. But globally our like focus right now is to be able to scale what we are good at the core.
Absolutely. I know for sure that I learn better when I'm interacting and talking through problems as opposed to just only exclusively reading or being talked at. And so I can see why this is working. And it comes back to the mission, right? When you talk about you're in 5% of households in Turkey and you want to expand to the other 95%, you really care about the mission and bringing this to students who don't have access. So excited for you guys to push forward there. If you think about your journey from starting to where you are today of building Kunduz together with your co-founders, what would you say your biggest challenge or challenges have been that you've had to overcome, and how did you push through those, power through those?
I think there are challenges at every level because I remember this like chart that we were like shown in the first or second week of YC. It shows the growth of Facebook, and when we think about growth of Facebook, we always see this like big
Shoot up.
like
Exponential curve.
J-curve, right? Crazy one. But if you look at it like in parts, you see S curves in different parts. And what they show as like timeline is that first they were in colleges, then they expand beyond colleges, then they expand globally by just like building a product where like the users itself can just like include their own language. And then the mobile era comes in, etc., and they do the acquisitions. And the sole purpose of showing that is you're not going to be able to grow like in the same way you were growing a year ago. That those methods are going to be a part of your growth, but you're going to have to keep putting different things. Sometimes it is like doing things better, sometimes adding a whole new tool to be able to grow, sometimes adding a whole new distribution channel and a new product, etc. And I think that resonated with us and with our own journey because, and also if you think about it, we always go by school years and every school year comes with a surprise. And one school year, like things weren't like going as exciting, and all of a sudden this COVID thing happened, and just like
Right.
we were like we didn't even have to do anything. Things just changed completely for the whole EdTech space. And but the good thing was that like we were prepared operationally and like technologically at the time, and that put us in a whole different scale. And ever since, we are just like seeing new opportunities to be able to keep the pace at the same level. And with the COVID, for example, all stakeholders in the education system were not very fond of technology, use of technology. But with COVID, they started to acknowledge it, and now we had a lot of partner schools and learning centers. Even the biggest corporations in Turkey offer Kunduz as a perk to their employees, because a lot of their employees have kids who go to middle school and high school, and these have become like new distribution channels for us. And Kunduz all of a sudden has become half B2B, half B2C company. We are still B2B2C, but we are like partnering with a lot of different corporations now in different personas.
Yeah.
And each of these opportunities has had a very catastrophic few months before that.
Right.
And in those moments, I think I always remind myself that I'm a lucky person, because I was told that way by my classmates in college. Some of my classmates were saying that like, give me Bashar's luck in life, sort of thing. Like, and I was kind of finding it
But
absurd.
I feel like Bashar works very hard. He makes his own luck. So I'm just telling your classmates that. It's not just all happening to you.
That's pretty much like what I like. That was my revelation, because I took it in the wrong way for a while because I found it unfair. But after a while, I realized that yes, because I make my own luck. I try things. I've been like proactive socially. I've been doing like weird things that other people wouldn't be doing, and I would be doing like exploring things that other people would find nonsense. And 8 out of 10 they were nonsense. 8 out of
Yeah,
10,
but
like
2 out of 10, they were amazing.
yeah, I mean those 2 out of 10s are just like giving me the best chances in life. And like basically whatever we do, whatever like we have on the table in the startup journey, we are always digging for these two, you know. And if you try 5 things, you're gonna end up finding one. If you try 10 things, you're gonna end up having like finding two, those 2 things. So I think opening my laptop, I always look at my screen just like thinking that I'm today starting a whole new day, just trying to make my own luck.
I love it. I was going to ask you, what do you think is the key to your success on the flip side? But I feel like you started to answer it. So starting with trying things, not being afraid to fail, because of the 10 things you try, 2 will succeed. Do any other things come to mind?
I think it pretty much explains my mindset. I'm not sure if you remember it, like because my name is phonetically similar, my name and last name. I was asked about the meaning of it, and in Turkey, most of the time the names has like a specific meanings, and mine is basically succeed, the first name, and the last name means successful. So people mostly think that like it is super unfair to me, and most of my life I haven't thought about that, because like I was raised in a family where I was like always push for trying things and just be okay with like failure. I remember going to this chess tournament at the age of 8, and literally had no like I couldn't win one game out of 7. And the next year I went, and I was like I got the first rank in the whole province at my age group, and from that point on, like chess has become a huge part of my life for the next 5 years. And if I had been like obsessed with the meaning of success or whatever, I would have left chess the first year. But I think I'm pretty much comfortable with the notion of failure and success. I think it's more about being opportunistic and making your own luck.
I love it. And then Bashar, what are your favorite things about what you do in your day-to-day, and what are some of the things that are harder for you today?
Especially compared to how I live life at GSP, I feel lucky that I put certain routines and habits in my life. I made peace with sleeping 8 hours a day. I was like always feeling FOMO just because I lost 8 hours in a day. But I realized that it gives me the energy and the creativity and everything you need during the remaining 16 hours. And I started like building this habit of like at least having like breathing exercises, even if you don't do like a full meditation. I at least just try to give myself like 5 to 10 minutes every day. I started like working out after so many years, not at a very committed way, but just like at least like 10 minutes, 15 minutes a day. I think putting these in routines was the biggest success in my life in the past few years, because it gave me a lot of energy and like perseverance in those hard moments. And I think, yeah, I think Marcin has taught me that first, very randomly, very like casually at GSP. Like he was very frustrated, like or like tired, leaving library, and we're just like chit chatting, and like he mentioned that like he had to deal with like something, and like what was that saying? Like ate the frog first or ate the frog?
Eat the
early?
frog.
Yeah,
Eat the frog in the morning.
yeah,
Do the
yeah,
hardest task first.
yeah. He's trying to just like practice that, but like he's not enjoying it, but like he's doing it. And like for me, just building those routines was so hard, but at the same time, I was always reminding myself like eating that frog is like crucial. And like every time I reminded myself, like Marcin's face was like literally just like echoing in my mind. So Marcin, thank you for that teaching. It helped me hugely in life.
How do you want to come on and say you're welcome? He's smiling next to me. It's okay. He does. He's shy of being in the video. Yeah. So I think I'm hearing, even if we go back to succeed, successful of Basar Basaran, and just how you were raised. I think to me, I'm hearing a lot of just not taking failure personally, being excited to try new things, and some of them will work out, some of them won't. Just having some belief in yourself that you will do something well, and removing some of this pressure. I think we all put so much pressure on ourselves, and sometimes just releasing the pressure is so much healthier for us. And then taking care of yourself, like making sure you're sleeping well. It's so funny because I talk to so many people, and we like so many relate with feeling bad about sleeping in, myself included. And I've just embraced the fact that I also love getting 8 hours. I feel so much more productive when I do. And I also really enjoy exercising. I think it just makes me a much better, more productive version of myself. So that's wonderful to hear. I wanted to end on this note, Bashar. What in education are you excited about looking forward, maybe 10 years away? And I want to actually ask you a question, because I am so curious whether we will have universities. In the sense of universities and tertiary education is becoming so expensive, and is it actually worth it? And I know there are debates in the EdTech space of whether or not that will, like, we will see maybe the top 10% of universities stay and the rest maybe convert into vocational training. I'm curious what your take on that is and what you're excited in the education space moving forward.
I mostly agree with the things that you mentioned, especially about there are certain schools who have a program that gives more than what they teach, and the top 10% especially. And those are an important part of the college education too. But at the same time, there's this big industry that gets benefit out of this notion of college without providing what this top 10% provides. So I think that is definitely changing. But and in terms of what we have been seeing as alternatives to college education, I think that's in the early ages of what's gonna happen in the future. The whole process right now, just like there are a lot of promising startups and companies just like embracing that whole mission. They are trying things, they are learning things. Sometimes their outcomes are not as they promised or as they hoped. But what I've been seeing is they've been trying new ways and new things to be able to make it better. I think that whole ecosystem is going to keep experimenting until it brings a very convincing alternative, not only for the students, but also for the economy. Because as much as what student is willing to invest their time in, it's also about whether the industry or the economy is happy with the outcomes of that education too. I think that is going to the outcomes of that is going to come a little bit behind, because people are graduating from these programs, and the companies who are hiring from these programs are just like having some like ideas about, or like whether they decide whether they're content about like what they find, etc. I think the best part of that is I think there's a good feedback mechanism between these startups and the industry. I think for the first time, there are some institutions which are startups who are listening to industry in a more dynamic way. And I think that is going to make the improvements much faster than what traditional universities are adapting themselves to. I don't think we are going to see a big change very fast. But if things go this way, I think the trend is going to continue.
Very cool. And what are you excited for in EdTech?
I think the education is all like it can mean so many things, and but what I put in my whole life mission is the social mobility part of it. And you can fully realize your potential and your dreams if like educational resources provided at an early age for you. And it sounds super simple, but to me it's magical, you know, just like every life can be changed if the resources are provided in the right way
Yes.
and to the right like to the people. And it's actually what Kunduz is about too. And we're trying to make that whole K-12 experience personalized or effective, much more effective at a price that everyone can afford. And I think that's also the reason I'm excited about it is like my own story too, because I haven't come from a disadvantageous background, but I came from a small town where like my whole lineage in the past 200 years haven't left. Like the same town, like for 200 years, a town that I love. But what I was taught by my family or like my surrounding was that education was the only way to and just go beyond that town and just like meet anyone you want, live anywhere you want, live in the way you want, whatever you can think of. And it can be like for some people, education means like changing a city or just like a specific school culture, sometimes only about education. For some people, it's the way you touch the world, impact the world, or like type of people that you want to be surrounded by. And I think it's the same. It was the same case for a lot of people, or like almost everyone in my high school and college. So coming with that excitement and story, and just finding people around me in the same way in high school and college, just confirm that education can change things for people. One research I'm obsessed with in education space is this research is done by someone called Bloom. A lot of people like who are in the space knows him from like different things that he did. And among his many findings and just like theories, like one of them is like the most striking for us. And what he tried, I think it was in 1984. His research was basically showing that an average student, if you pick an average student, the 50th percentile student, and give them a one-on-one tutoring, and that one-on-one tutoring can put that average student in the top 2 percentile. That's a drastic change. And like statistically, it is like 2 sigma. That's why he called it 2 sigma problem. But I think the best part of that is not the 2 sigma part, the fact that he called it a problem, because he saw that one-on-one tutoring can create a much better impact in education, but there is no like country in the world who can afford that, who can provide like a one-on-one tutoring to every student in that country. That's impossible. And I think 40 years after that, almost 40 years after that, what I love, or what we love seeing, is that he rightfully defined it as a problem, but there have been so many inflection points in technology that now we can see it as an opportunity, like how we can use technologies like AI or like use of platforms in a way that we can make that whole one-on-one learning experience and automate it in certain ways, but still connect them to tutors when needed for the emotional elements of it. I think that's the real opportunity, especially in K-12, and what I'm most excited about.
Bashar, my dad was one of 7 children. He's the only one to get educated. And similarly, he's the only one who left the small village where generations of his family were living in. So I very, very much agree with what you're saying. And what a cool response. So I'll just say I'm excited for Kunduz to be more accessible around the world, and for more kids who currently don't have access to individualized teaching and training and need more help to be able to get it. This was wonderful. I'm such a big fan of what you're building. Thank you so much for coming, and I can't wait to have you again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and great to see you.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you like what you hear, leave a review and share.